Iran has kept up attacks on Israel and Gulf states despite intense US and Israeli bombing. The Strait of Hormuz remains effectively closed, limiting the transit of vital energy supplies. So what is Iran's strategy? What are its options? This is Inside Story. Hello there and welcome to the programme. I'm Nick Clark. Despite intense attacks from Israel and the United States and the assassination of senior figures, Iran continues to respond with military force. Strikes have penetrated Israel's defences and have hit neighbouring Gulf states, with targets ranging from energy facilities to hotels and airports. Tehran has essentially closed the Strait of Hormuz, cutting off a fifth of the world's oil and gas supplies. And wherever you're watching us today, the impact of all of this is being felt. President Donald Trump and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth have trumpeted US military prowess, but they haven't yet removed Iran's strategic cards from its hand. So what are Iran's tactics in this war, and are they working? What are the risks, not just to those at the receiving end, but to Iran itself? We'll discuss this with our guest shortly, but first, this report from Laura Khan.
Iran has been continuing its attacks. More missiles headed towards Israel on Wednesday. And after President Donald Trump threatened to attack Iran's power plants if it didn't open the Strait of Hormuz, the US now seems to be rowing back. On Monday, President Trump announced a 5-day pause on plans to bomb energy and power infrastructure and has drafted a 15-point plan to end the war. It calls for Iran to dismantle its nuclear capabilities, end uranium enrichment, and stop funding and arming groups in the region. Tehran's military denies talks are taking place.
The strategic power you used to talk about has turned into a strategic failure. The one claiming to be a global superpower would have already gotten out of this mess if it could. Don't dress up your defeat as an agreement. Your era of promises has come to an end.
Since the US and Israel began bombing Iran on February the 28th, Tehran has fought back, with missiles managing to evade Israel's defense systems, causing significant damage. Attacks have targeted US assets in the Gulf, but civilian and energy infrastructure has been hit across the region. Kuwait's international airport was among the latest struck. Iran's geography also gives it powerful leverage at sea. It effectively controls the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow waterway and transit route for roughly a fifth of the world's oil supply before the war. After effectively closing the maritime route, Tehran says it will now allow passage to vessels belonging to nations it considers not to be hostile. Iran has spent decades preparing for a war, creating a decentralized military system to enable local commanders to take responsibility for defense if top military leaders are killed. The current war strategy, involving attacking other countries not involved in the war, is creating new fronts and risks. Laura Khan for Inside Story, Al Jazeera.
All right, let's bring in our guest to home in on Iran's position at this critical moment in the war in Tehran. We have Foad Izadi, who's professor at the Faculty of World Studies at the University of Tehran. In Doha is Mehran Kamrava, who's a professor at Georgetown University here in Qatar. He's also the director of the Iranian Studies Unit at the Arab Center for Research and Policy Studies. And in Brussels, pleased to say, we've got Elijah Magnier, who's a military and political analyst who specialises in wars in the Middle East. A very warm welcome to each of you. So before we get to the heart of Iran's overall strategy and its position of strength or weakness, what about the possibility of negotiations, I wonder? Because the Iranian military say that Donald Trump is negotiating with himself, and that, Foad Izadi, may be so. But Iran is engaged diplomatically with several countries, including reportedly Egypt, Turkey and Pakistan. So talks are happening, aren't they? And Iran's strategy has engineered this position.
Yes, talks are happening, not with the United States, with these countries, helpful countries, Iran's neighbors. As you know, everybody is suffering This is a war, unnecessary war that Trump and Netanyahu started, and Iran wants to make sure that it ends. We are getting bombings every day. I'm in Tehran. We had a new round of bombings just about an hour ago. We are losing a couple of hundred people on average every day, civilians. We have lost thousands of civilians, billions of dollars worth of damage to Iranian infrastructure. Everybody realizes that this war will end sooner or later. In order to do that, we need to talk. But I don't think the Trump administration or Netanyahu are interested. One way of getting this war ended faster is stop attacking Iran today.
Okay, Mehran, there is a view, of course, that Donald Trump wants to get out of this situation. There's many counter views too, but that's one of the views. Isn't this therefore an opportunity for Iran to wrest advantage? Many say Iran has the upper hand.
It is an opportunity, but I think there's a legitimate concern in Iran that a few months from now, the United States or Israel could attack again. And what we're seeing is a redo of what transpired during the so-called 12-day war back in June of 2025. So the concern is in Tehran to come to some sort of an agreement that somehow guarantees that there won't be a repeat of this war again a few months or a couple of years from now.
And with that concern, it's important to home in, to study how this, at this critical juncture, how Iran diplomatically, militarily, and indeed strategically is placed. And Elijah Magnier there in Brussels, because it's evident, isn't it, that Iran does hold considerable leverage over the Strait of Hormuz, and that is a crucial factor in all of this.
Yes, it is. But if we look what's happening today, the whole war turned focused toward the Strait of Hormuz. Now, why any negotiation cannot take place and lead to any result today is exactly what happened in June 2025 when both sides did not win, did not lose. There was a bombardment and a phone call stopped the war. This time, there is a need of some loser or some winner, or at least someone like Donald Trump searching for political and psychological gain to create a sudden, undeniable shift in the balance of the conflict and a spectacular, low-risk, high-visibility operation, not a full-scale invasion. And where he can achieve that is by occupying one of the islands in the Strait of Hormuz and immediately call for a ceasefire or call a victory for himself. And because the Strait of Hormuz is the focus indeed, this is where he can say, okay, let us stop. But it doesn't mean he's going to achieve that because Iran is not going to accept that. And holding a ground doesn't mean being able to defend it, protect it, and keep it.
Foad, it's true to say that Iran is very unlikely to forfeit any leverage that it holds over the Strait of Hormuz without major concessions that have to be yielded by Israel and the United States, right?
I agree. Iran needs to be compensated for all these damages. One way is for U.S. and Israel to deposit cash in Iranian bank accounts. That may not happen. We don't know. It may. One way would be for some of these countries in the neighborhood that have provided bases to the United States and, in fact, help the United States in this illegal war. They can pay for it. That's the second option. The third option is to basically have some sort of an agreement with the country of Oman. You know, Oman is on the other side of the Strait of Hormuz, and they could create a Strait of Hormuz authority, some body that would level transit fees on ships that go through. Iran is not a member of the Convention on Law of Seas. neither is United States, neither is Israel. We have some countries that do that. For example, Turkey calls it transit fees, and they have access to a couple of straits.
Okay, Mehran, the point is, sorry to jump in there. Foad, I just want to say to Mehran that the point is that the strait comes into play in the way that Foad describes, simply because Iran realized before this all started, many years ago, that the strait was always going to be a critical player in such a scenario.
Absolutely. And what is shocking is that the United States does not seem to have realized that this was a trump card that the Iranians had in their hand. Their ability to either close the Strait of Hormuz or more easily to harass shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. And I think what we're seeing is Iran now has an even greater excuse to close the Strait of Hormuz or to constrain shipping from going through the Strait of Hormuz, because earlier today we heard President Trump say that Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar are actively helping Israeli-American war on Iran. And so as far as the Iranians are concerned, now these three states are active belligerents against Iran, and therefore the Strait of Hormuz should be closed, or at least only open to shipping that the Iranians want to have open. And this is something they've been threatening since the end of the Iran-Iraq war. What is surprising is that the Americans don't seem to have taken them seriously.
If we come to you, Elijah, there are more than 3,000 ships stuck in the Gulf now, and Iran says it will allow safe passage for non-hostile vessels. Do you think that's a sign that Iran wants to permanently control the strait, something that Foad just alluded to? Even there's talk of a toll being charged for transit. And if so, that's something that really won't go down at all well with its Gulf neighbours.
Well, Iran can't charge anything now because it is there is a binding, which is the UNCLOS. This is why it cannot charge the fees. However, this is one of the leverage point of negotiation with the Americans that Iran can raise, saying with the Suez Canal or the Bosphorus, there are some charges. However, these two are also linked to a specific treaty, which is not the case of Iran. Nevertheless, anything is valid today on the table that is said. It doesn't mean this is what each party is going to reach. Donald Trump said something that slipped out of his mouth, although he contradicts himself all the time. He said, I and the Ayatollah will control the Strait of Hormuz, which means both sides don't want to close the Strait of Hormuz. Iran will close it only if the Americans land on the Strait of Hormuz and becomes a battlefield. This is where Iran can say, this is not my fault. The Americans came in and now we exchange missiles and we fight. There are thousands of troops, Marines, amphibious troops, and the commandos are coming. We're talking about 5,000 to 6,000 troops. These are going to do something in the Strait of Hormuz, not to occupy Iranian territory. Even the islands are Iranian territory, but they can occupy land to claim some right on the Strait of Hormuz and to sit and negotiate, which means for the Iranians, closing the Strait of Hormuz will create a fireback against its Asian partners and other partners that are still benefiting, and also for its own oil. However, this is a price that Iran can pay only in extremis if Donald Trump pushes Iran toward that option. And Iran can always sink a tanker in a small passage in the Strait of Hormuz and then block it completely. Then nobody wins. So it is very delicate to say Iran is going to impose this or stop the navigation, because it's a double-edged sword.
Okay. Mehran, on that issue of ground forces, how will Iran be preparing for any potential US effort to deploy ground troops, with several thousand, as Elijah has just mentioned, are en route. How well equipped is Iran to deflect that?
It's very hard to tell because we don't know really how capable Iranians are. And so far, they continue to surprise everyone by their ability to fight back, despite overwhelming American and Israeli firepower. But I think we need to look at history. If we look at history, every time a bigger power has occupied a smaller power in a war of choice, whether it was the Soviet Union and Afghanistan, or the United States and Iraq, or the US and Vietnam, or Russia and Ukraine, in none of those instances have the bigger power been able to accomplish their military objectives. Of course, as Professor Izadi mentioned, wars do not have any winners. But if there's going to be a loser, it's the country that occupies, in a war of choice, a territory of another country. And if the United States embarks on that initiative and occupies one of the Iranian islands, over time, regardless of Iranian military capabilities, it doesn't have the pain threshold that the Iranians can inflict over time. And all we're going to see is devastation, destruction, but ultimately American loss also.
Part of the plan, Foad, clearly was to attack neighbours in the Gulf, the preconceived plan that this so-called horizontal escalation, to put pressure on the United States. And yes, it certainly did. But it's a dangerous game, isn't it? The regional nations, the Gulf nations, they're running out of patience, aren't they? A lot of those missiles are hitting civilian and energy infrastructure. Sooner or later, that patience may run out. And that is a real danger for Iran, isn't it, Foad?
It could be. I think these countries realize that if they officially join the war, they are basically providing resources, soldiers to Netanyahu. And after what Netanyahu has done in Gaza, engaged in genocide, is an indicted war criminal in international courts. I don't think that they really would want to do that. We have reports from Western news outlets, New York Times, the others. They said that the Saudis are encouraging Trump to continue the fight.
Yes, there are reports that the Saudis want to join the fray, yeah.
Yeah, the Wall Street Journal reported that they have already done that. Iran hit 5 refueling American airplanes in a Saudi base, not an American base in Saudi Arabia, a Saudi base. Trump tried to dismiss that and said that it wasn't 5, it was 1, which is actually confirming the fact that Saudis are providing their airports to U.S. military. The Secretary of War has said that they have conducted 6,000 sorties. You cannot do that unless you use these countries, neighboring countries. The ships that the U.S. has is very far away. They don't want to get close to Iran because they don't want to be sunk.
Right. So
overall, the hope that Iran has is that the neighboring countries understand that Iran is fighting for Iran. It's an old country. The civilization has been around for thousands of years. And these countries, we hope in Iran, that they realize that changing Iran's borders or taking over Iranian oil is not good. The other side is interested in their territory. Netanyahu has talked about Greater Israel.
Let me take that up with Elijah, if I may, Foad, because this so-called horizontal escalation, going big early, locally, as we have seen, it is unprecedented, isn't it? And there really is a danger for the region. Don't you think it could yet imperil the whole region and escalate things beyond?
Well, it's already going more actively in Iraq, where the Iraqi government has announced that its armed forces, including not only Hashd al-Sha'bi, but also the army, has a right to defend itself. Between announcing it and acting it, there would be differences, particularly when Iraq is bound by the selling of oil that goes to America. However, it is expanding regionally, but the Gulf countries will not come into the war unless Iran is clearly defeated. For now, the energy infrastructure, the assets are very fragile. The Bab el-Mandeb is still open. The Red Sea is navigable, so that the Strait of Hormuz is not shut down unless only to the enemy of Iran. Therefore, for the time being, the Gulf countries accept that Iran is implying Article 3314, saying if your territory is used against me, then you are in partnership with the Americans, and this is acceptable so far. However, if the Americans hit the Iranian energy, which the Israelis have been trying in the last 2 days to do so, then the war will take another shape, and this is where it's going to be extremely damaging, and the cost of war is extremely high already, but it's going to be higher on the world economy.
Mehran, what do you think? Is striking out at Gulf countries still to Iran's advantage, do you think?
Well, obviously, it's increased the pressure not just on the Gulf states, but also on the United States. So, as you mentioned, Nick, this is an extremely risky strategy that the Iranians are pursuing. But for the time being, it does appear to have borne results in the sense that the Persian Gulf states now realize that they are indeed within Iranian missiles, and that the Iranians are willing to use their missiles in order to hit these states. And so, and I know that the local economies, regional economies, are greatly suffering, and the instability in the region is palpable. So it's a very risky strategy that the Iranians have pursued so far. And if it continues beyond this, I think there might be an actual entry of the Saudis and especially the Emiratis into the conflict. The Emiratis are very eager to get their hands on those 3 disputed islands in the Persian Gulf. And given their ejection from Yemen, that eagerness is all the more palpable these days.
Foad, another surprise advantage Iran has demonstrated, it surprised many, was its military capacity. The US and Israel for weeks have been talking about how it's been pretty much obliterated, yet the missiles and the drones, they keep on coming. But at some point, surely Iran will run out.
That's true. Some of the missile factories are underground and they're more difficult to hit. Let me also say that we have had civilian damage in the Persian Gulf countries, but they are linked to the United States. So when the U.S. started bombing Iranian banks, Iran hit American banks. These are civilian targets, but Iran has said that the new leadership in Iran is going to follow the doctrine of an eye for an eye. So anything that's linked to the United States is going to be legitimate target. We have had some debris also falling in unintended places, but overall, I think Iran can manage its fight for many months to come. But I think Iranians hope this war to finish today.
Elijah, Iran has also relished many nations saying no to Donald Trump, and yet we have the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte expressing backing for Donald Trump's war, saying that European allies will eventually come together and join the fight. And that might be true, mightn't it, if Iran keeps pushing up the price of oil?
Well, actually, NATO is the United States, and the British are already supporting the US, offering Diego Garcia, and inevitably they fall under the article of the United Nations Security Council, 33-14. However, the French yesterday, chief of staff and the president before him, accused the Americans, saying we were not invited and we are not part of this war. We don't want it. We suffer the consequences. The only thing that Donald Trump is doing is blackmailing the Americans because we feel in Europe vulnerable due to the war in Ukraine. And the Europeans are terrified of the idea of the United States letting go of the operational base in Ramstein, Germany, where there are 50 nations conducting the war against Russia. So in exchange of that, Donald Trump saying, you have to come in. Normally, the Americans form a coalition before the beginning of the war, but Donald Trump was so confident that he's going to win it in 3 or 4 days that he did not call for help. Now he's calling for help, and that is really serious because it's showing that Iran managed to stay up to the challenge of the strongest country in the world and the strongest army in the Middle East, and conducting a war of attrition that even Donald Trump is calling for help in the Strait of Hormuz, reducing all his objectives of regime change and defeating the army, defeating the IRGC, defeating the missile program, and the missile is still falling into only the Strait of Hormuz.
Okay.
This reduction of objectives.
Let me just jump in there, Elijah, because we're just running out of time. I want to bring in Mehran just one more time. Forgive me. So, Mehran, Iran might have a stronger hand than anybody ever imagined, but isn't there a big danger of Iran overplaying that hand?
Absolutely. And on a number of occasions in the past, it has overplayed its hand. And it could very well overplay its hand with the Strait of Hormuz if this continues, or it can overplay its hand with attacks on Saudi Arabia and the UAE and Qatar and Kuwait. Absolutely, this is a danger. And so the Iranians are walking a tightrope. And so, as everyone has mentioned, it is to everybody's advantage for this war to end and end very quickly.
Gents, we're going to have to leave it there. Mehran Kamrava in Doha, Elijah Magnier in Brussels, and of course Foad Izadi there in Tehran. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. And thank you too for watching. You can see the programme again at any time just by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on X. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. For now, that's it from me, Nick Clark, and the whole team here. Stand by for Al Jazeera's continuing coverage of the war. More in just a moment.